if they're true or false. And so you raise your hand if you think that they're true, and then look around the room and see what your friends think. Your grief will go away in time. True or false? Raise your hand high so I can see them. Don't be ashamed. Okay, all right. Well, wait till the end now. You're trying to get the answer key. All right. You will get over it. True or false? Okay. Grief and mourning are the same thing. Oh, this is a smart group. Suck it up. Just ignore it, and you will get over it. Okay. Get busy. Avoid thinking about it. All right. What is this? I teach a Sabbath school class, and I have one person that's always ahead, and it sounds like you all belong to that class. Okay, your grief will never go away in time. You just learn to manage it better. That's all. So if you have that expectation, you're putting things on yourself, as the doctor has told us, that will stress us out, you will never get over it. The best you can do is to learn how to live with it and learn how to carry that person with you in your new life. Suck it up, ignore it, it'll go away. Now, what I'm going to share with you, a lot is from research and a lot is from my own personal experience, so I'll distinguish which is which. I thought that I could suck it up and ignore it and it would go away when my 18-month-old baby died. And my in-laws at the time decided to use their influence with the police department, and so it was a big hullabaloo, investigation and all that. And even my husband at that time was even on his mother's side, okay? And even my mother said to me, "Did you have anything to do with the baby's death?" Talk about feeling all alone. But the only thing that I could do was just suck it up for a good reason, because I didn't want the kids that I had to go to either one of their grandparents. That sounds pretty bad. But that was my motivation, and that worked, and I thank God for it. But when I got pregnant with Suzanne, all of those feelings came up again because I was so fearful and afraid of losing her. Like the doctor said, that carries on. I remember Lawrence coming home. I'm in the basement, table full of laundry over here, table full of laundry over here. I'm holding the baby is crying, and I'm crying. So he comes home and he sees this, and I thank God for him every day, because he could have put me right in a mental institution. I mean, I was ripe, okay? But he didn't. He says, "You go upstairs and go to bed, and I'm going to take care of the baby, and I'll take care of everything." And he did. He did. So I'm very thankful for him. But I'm saying that to give you an illustration that it doesn't go away. When you suppress it, it's like ivory soap. I don't know if any of you are old enough to remember ivory soap. You push it down, and it floats right back up. And at the most inopportune times. All right, well, let me see which button I need to hit. So let's go on to this here. Oh, God, we're already there. We missed something. Let's go back. This is one of the key points. You have to be present to the presence and the present moment in the cycle of life, all right? Because life goes through many cycles, all right? Now, we talk about grief. Grief is deep, deep sorrow. And for many of us, we're waiting for the storm of grief to pass. Look at what the next one says. Life is not about waiting for the storm to pass, but learning to dance in the rain. I don't know about you, but the only time that I've ever felt good about being in the rain is when I had natural hair. Okay, so that's what grief is. Loss is the same. Loss is so strange because we can lose our keys and find ourselves crying and wonder, what's that about? Because it hooks into things. Hooks into things. Why grief? This is not research. This is my theory. My theory is that God has given us grief to draw us to him and to help us experience what he experienced when we choose not to heal the broken relationship between us and God. When you think about that, you go back to Adam and Eve when that relationship was broken. What was the first thing that they did? They were ashamed. They hid. They caused blame. And then they stopped communicating with God and each other. Don't we use those same defense mechanisms, I guess we want to call it? But we go back to that default pattern when something happens to us. So I believe that grief is God saying, come here and let me show you something. Let me show you something. Later, I guess for the end, I'm going to talk to you about Elijah and what God shows him, okay? Coping with grief. I hope to show you how to cope with it. So this is my take on it. Grief is like an octopus, and this won't stay where it's supposed to. An octopus's arms with hooks, suction cups. Have you ever gotten sucked in to grief? Sometimes you can go to a funeral and you're crying like crazy. You didn't even know the person, right? It's a seeping, toxic ink that gets into every nook and cranny that's not sealed. So what I'm hoping to cover for you today is understanding some life cycles. I appreciate the doctor, she went over many. How to manage your grief, balance your journey, and how to help yourself. Okay? Okay, understanding life cycles. Life has a cycle of grief and loss are a part of the cycle. When you think about it, your whole life, just step back. All you see is cycles, but abundance and joy are the same. These are some of the cycles. Your health, sickness, the solar cycle, light and dark, seasons, day and night, life and death. Your breath. Is not your breath a cycle? Can you tell when it stops to turn around? You breathe in, and then at some point, it turns around. Okay? And relationship. It's all about relationship. That's why Christ was sent to heal the broken relationship between God and his children. Relationship. I mean, thank God for God, because I think I would have just started over. Okay? So, but the growth that we have during grief and our cycle. And you think about grief like manure. Yeah? It's smelly, it's messy, but it helps us grow if we deal with it. All right? And now my husband talks about walking. That when you're walking, you put one step in front of the other. Well, what are you doing? You're breaking the fall. That's a cycle. So pay attention to the cycles in life and recognize that we are part of it. So this is the relationship cycle. This is a whole different seminar on its own, but I always like to include this because when you're looking at Scripture, if you look at it through this, you get so much more out of it. The first part is the infatuation where everything is beautiful and right, and you have this relationship with God. Let's say most of us have had this relationship with God. Then you get to a disillusionment where maybe God didn't fix something for you, or your husband left his socks on the floor. You know, he's not perfect anymore. And then we come to a place of conflict. Most of us stop at conflict. The church has never taught us how to deal with conflict. Our parents didn't teach us how to deal with conflict unless you observed how they did conflict. Now, my mother did conflict the old Southern way. I ain't speaking to you no more. I'm not even going to look in your direction, okay? What does that do? That just makes it worse. And a lot of us as women, where am I? A lot of us as women, when we get the conflict, we change partners. It's not about the conflict itself. Because if we learn how to work through that conflict, come to a resolution, then we re-choose that person with boundaries. And a perfect example of this in Scripture is the prodigal son. And that's exactly what happened. But what happened with the elder son, he never dealt with the conflict. Never dealt with the conflict. All right? So, understanding grief. Grief is terribly emotional. The journey begins, it continues, and it's managed. It's not taken care of. You have a regime change. With that person not in your life, or that thing, or that pet, your whole life has changed. Whether you want to admit it or not, it has. God felt grief. I tell you, my mother would send me to the country in the summer. I thought she was trying to give me fun, but I think she was trying to give herself a break. And the thing that we had to do before meals, we had to hold hands and say a Bible verse. I'm from city. I didn't know no Bible verse. Give me a break. So I learned one quickly. Y'all know it. Jesus wept. But the trick is that you had to say it before anybody else said it, because that was it. But God felt grief. Jesus felt grief. And God is still feeling grief about some of the things that we are doing. Grief is ugly. Teary, messy. Like I said, it's like manure. It really is. But you have to embrace it to grow. The other part about grief that makes it difficult is that we have preacher pals and platitudes. Well, people say, oh, he's in a better place now. Oh, you'll get over it. Oh, don't be so sad. Just cheer up. You know, it's not like that. And that is not helpful. So if you know someone that's grieving, look them in the eye and listen to them. They may tell you the same story 7, 8 times. Listen like you've never heard it before. Okay? That's the best gift. And then self-care. We have to learn how to take care of yourself. This is something I've been struggling with. It's funny that Maxine called me, because I think she called me like Tuesday or so. Wednesday was my son's birthday, who died 2.5 years ago. And I was in the dark place. I wanted to lick my wounds, be left alone, leave me alone, okay? But when she called, I put on my happy face and I said yes before I knew it, and then when I hung up, what did you do? But I thank God for that, because it pulls you out. That's the one thing. Self-care involves being engaged with others, being engaged with yourself. And I have the self-care wheel. He's making some copies for you. Now, I can't do everything on that wheel. I think it's about 8 or 9 things on that wheel in pie shape. Sometimes I can only do 5 minutes with one, and that's a win. Sometimes I can only get up and take a shower, and that's a win for the whole family. Okay? So, you know, you just count your wins. You do what you can when you can. I was telling somebody, my best friend is a psychologist, and I don't know if she's my best friend because she is a psychologist and I'm crazy, or she just loves me. She swears she doesn't shrink me, but I don't know. But this is what she told me, and I never forget it. She says, all of that stuff in your closet, just open the door, put your hand in space, pull out one thing, and deal with it. That has been so helpful to me, Because when we think about going into our grief, we, we think about opening the door and all the stuff tumbling out on top of us. So self-care is critical. Now, oh God, you can't hardly see that on that, can you? This is about managing your grief. Accept the loss. You can say you accept the loss, but unless you feel it in your gut that you've accepted it, you're not looking for the phone call. You're not thinking, well, Michael's coming over today. Sunday is a special time. You know, that you're dealing with the loss. Feel your feelings with boundaries. I'm going to share a little bit of personal on that because when Michael died, I was just a crybaby in the bed, leave me alone in the dark with my dark glasses on, okay? And I called my doctor. I didn't want to see him, but he knew me. Actually, my kids used to babysit for him. That's how young he was, right? And he says, I'm going to put you on antidepressants. And so I was on antidepressants. And then after a while, I felt like the antidepressant wasn't getting to my grief, that it was only on the surface. And I stopped taking them. I transitioned. I worked with a doctor to transition off of them. But what happened with that, I learned that I have to feel my feelings, that I will feel more joy if I allow myself to feel the pain. They're two sides of the same coin. You can't shut down your feelings. That creates stress, as the good doctor has told us. I have to see what else it says here. Okay, so the 5 steps from Kubler-Ross that we've all learned, denial, anger, bargaining with God, depression, and then acceptance, that is when the person is dying. This is new research. I always thought that that was it, and you just keep going through those cycles again and again. No, you don't. That's what you do while the person is living. When the person passes, you have other tasks that you need to do, like to reorganize, to accept, to rebuild, and to forgive. And when we think about forgiveness, the first person I want you to think about forgiving is God. Okay? When my baby died, I remember, that was back when they had phone booths. Y'all too young to remember phone booths. I remember being in the hospital and going into the phone booth. My husband then was with his girlfriend in Africa. It had just rained the night before, and I called the elder of the church, and he says, I'm bailing out my basement. I can't come. I was truly all alone, all right? I went in that phone booth, and I closed the phone booth, and I prayed like I've never prayed before. And all of a sudden, I felt this calm, this peace, that everything was going to be all right. Of course, my interpretation of that was that the baby was going to live, and everything was going to be fine. That wasn't what happened. The baby died, okay? So I had to forgive God because I knew he could have interceded and didn't. And I felt like since he gave me this flush of spirit and calm, that the baby was going to be fine. But it wasn't. So believe me, 10 years later, like I said, when Lawrence found me crying, I still had on the glasses, trying to work through it, all right? I had to see a therapist. Lawrence was smart enough to say, you need to see somebody. And I did. I learned to forgive God. I learned to forgive myself. I'm a great cook, but I'm not a great housekeeper. And of course, I thought that maybe I didn't wipe her bed off enough, that she got sick. The coulda, shoulda, woulda that always comes in. All right, and then the last part of this is to re-engage and embrace what's going on. That's what I'm talking about, living in the present. I had other children. They needed a mother too, and they didn't need a mother that was crying all the time. Okay, now these are the tasks afterwards. This is new. This is the research. The morning task. Forgiveness, God, yourself, and and other human beings. Learn how to care for yourself. Communicate with others. Have a community. Have a community. The biggest difference between the death of my first child and the death of my second child was that I had a community around me. They left food on the steps. They called. I could feel their prayers. They sent plants over, but they were there for me. Okay? Self-care. Care for yourself. Maybe you don't take a shower every day, but you could take one every other day, or you could at least wash up. Communicate. Communicate what you need. We as women tend to put our needs on the back burner and take care of everybody else first. We need to recognize that we have to fill our own pitcher before we can pour into somebody else's glass. Okay? And eliminating stuff, but not the memories. With my son's death came tons of stuff he had in his townhouse that we still are going through. And you know, you kind of, I don't want to throw this away because this was Michael's. We need to keep the memories, throw the stuff away. And one of the things that is to help with that is Shutterfly. Take your best pictures and make a beautiful book out of it. I meant to bring mine, but I didn't. Now, this has to summarize in an acronym, TEAR. To accept the reality of the loss, to experience the pain of the loss. Now, if you need painkillers, yeah, I take Tylenol too sometimes, or antidepressants to help you through that, you're the only one that knows what's best for you, besides you and your doctor, all right? And then adjust to the new environment without the lost person, and then begin to reinvest in the new reality. So grief, again, is like an octopus with hooks and suction cups that try to grab hold of you on everything and seep into your life. These are the things I want you to remember. That one, you're not alone. Looking around, you all are a community of strong women. Look at this. You got each other. Stay in touch. All right? It's okay to not to be okay. Seek help when you need it. Movement. The doctor talked about that. Look, you can tell by my waistline that I'm not much on movement. But what I've been trying to do is if I'm going to watch TV, I do the chair yoga, where you lift up your toes, and sometimes you're doing this, sometimes you're doing this, but some kind of movement, because all of the movement helps you. Communication through a journal, and the doctor has some journals there, or just a plain spiral journal that you can buy Staples for 25 cents. People, stay in communication with people. I want to talk about meditation a minute, because we as Adventists have memorized more scripture than other people have ever learned, okay? But meditation is not reading the scripture once or twice and prose in the Bible. That's not meditation. Meditation is taking a deep dive on what God has said, to focus on each word and what it means, to set in the stillness with it. I had hoped that I would have been with you on the second part of this so that I could have walked you through it, but just to give you an idea, like take the verse, be still and know that I'm a God. So if you're meditating on that, you think about what does it mean to be? We as Adventists, we're quick to do, slow to be. What does it mean to be? Still. What stillness? Stillness of my body, stillness of my mind, staying put where I am, and know. How do I know God? I say we know God when we meet him in our dark places. Okay? But we have to be intentional about that. Nobody wants to sit in silence. Well, some of Lawrence's friends do. But But we're resistant to that. You know, we're resistant to sitting in silence and working with ourselves. It's a lot easier to read or to watch TV or do something else. So meditation and sitting in silence requires work. All right? Creativity, social, and there's the silence. Identify where you are. That's what you do in your journal. Where am I now? What am I feeling? All right. This is the balanced journey. Inward and outward. Like I say, at that minute, we're good on going out. But I say we shouldn't go out until we're in. In. peace would go by and say, I hail Maxine, the Christ in you. So that would be my greeting to you. Can you see Christ in the other person? If you stare long enough, maybe you can. Be present to the moment. And then choose how you're going to respond. You may not always respond with rose-colored glasses. Sometimes they may be blue. But I believe that whatever you do, you've got to be intentional about seeking God. And not on the surface, ladies, but really a deep dive into His Word. I think that's it. Thank you. Thank you. Are there any questions on that? Say what? Oh, no. Okay. Yes. To be strong. I'll be mother and father. My thoughts on that is know thyself. And when you spend time with God, you're journaling, you're looking on the inside. And it's painful to look on the inside. I mean, even your families won't tell you sometimes how awful you can be. So when you go on the inside and you look at that and you know who you are, you can come out with a greater love for other people. And when people see that love, man, they just melt to it. They don't know how to explain it. So you've got to love yourself, but you've got to know yourself. And you've got to be able to set boundaries. Some boundaries are just non-crossable. I mean, like this may be too personal, but, one of my boundaries with my husband is put the toilet seat down. Okay? So he always tells me, I've only messed up on that a couple of times, so, but you've got to set boundaries to know what is good for you and what isn't. And if you don't, pray about it, but not just pray about it. That's why the silence is so important, because the silence is listening to God, not the static, not the noise of the world, not your to-do list, but listening to God. And it takes work to get there. Yes. Yes, I do, and I do have some resources. If you give me your email, I'll communicate with you that way. And a couple of books, okay? A couple of books that have helped us a lot. And actually, Lawrence is, we were going on a silent retreat this weekend, but a friend of mine died, so I'm going to the funeral. He's going to the retreat. Uh-huh.
consider me an extension of thee, even though I'm up here as a male. Uh, but when you pose that question about some of these roles that our young women are taking now, we all have a hidden wholeness. We all have a hidden wholeness. And it's hidden by, the systems that we grow up under, the culture, and all of this stuff buries it. And our work of encountering God is often unburying all of that stuff that's around us. And when we do, we have a fresh sense of who God is and a fresh sense of who we are. So I just want to encourage, as we encounter our young daughters and young women, to recognize their essence and to point it out to them, and to have them to embrace that part of themselves that is buried. And we do have to be intentional about being human. If we're not intentional about being human, we're inhuman. And we see the result of that every day. But we were made to be human, and we have to encourage each other and recognize that hidden essence and speak to that. It will rise. It will rise.
And the other thing that he says that he forgot is that we have to practice being human. We have to practice the presence of God. Brother Lawrence is probably one of the best books that I've read about that. A young monk who washed dishes, but he washed dishes to the glory of God. Can you imagine? I mean, I hate to wash dishes. I hate to even look at them. Thank God Lawrence washes the dishes. But I'm just saying, but in that small act, he saw it. How did he see it? Through his love for God, for God's love for him, that he was making a difference. So I have a stickers on the table. You'll just leave me your email, and I'll be happy to send stuff to you. Okay? All right. Oh, this is what. Thank you very much, Dee. Chaplain Dee Taylor. She digs deep. No, please, please.
ladies and gentlemen of the jury, it's just been a very deep and awe-inspiring session. I think we've touched some nerves. We've looked at things from different angles. I first met Dee because I was desperate for a speaker when I worked in women's ministry at the previous church that I was at. This is my 4th women's ministry leadership. And I grew up in London, but I had never met the pastor, the associate pastor of Sligo Church. Her name was Mary. And Mary said, well, ask Dee. I can't come down there, Maxine, but Chaplain Dee Taylor will come. And so she came, and she brought her husband with her, and she set up in church, and we were all just spellbound because she kept it real and raw. So I just want to thank God for putting each of you in this room and in each other's lives. Reach out to each other, console, comfort each other, strengthen, inspire, lead, and grow. I hope you're going to be empowered when you go home and ever after. Thank you, Dee. Our next speaker is a wonderful person that I met through horse riding. Now, I myself don't horse ride. There's much admiration and respect to be given to those who do horse ride. When I met Celeste, she was so full of joy and love for the children. Her greatest desire is to inspire, lead, and grow with and for the children. As such, Celestine Edmonds, Master of Arts, Speech Language Pathologist, will now present the importance of parental engagement in children's academic success. Here you go.
Thank you so much, Dr. Marsh. I so appreciate your invitation to speak in this opportunity to speak. First and foremost, I'd like to say thank you to all the beautiful daughters and son of the Most High God. And thank you, Miss Ginger, for making me feel so welcome. So welcome, in fact, that this morning when I started getting ready, what should I wear? Well, I start out with heels like this, then they start going like this, and then now you see. This is the best I can do. Okay. But I am so glad that he is a God, before I begin, he is a God that's well acquainted with our grief. He is Adonai, Lord, Master of the storm. And he is Jehovah Shalom. He is our peace. So thank you for that powerful word. And I just feel like, how can I go on with this after that? But bless God. I'm going to start off with a narrative. I remember I'm an Army brat and traveled around the world and exposed to a lot of different cultures. And I remember one day I ran home and I told my mom, wow, there's my classmate, she can spell Mississippi. And I was just like, wow, she's so smart. And I remember my mom and her just calm self said, come here, M-I-S-S-I-P-P-I, M-I-S-S-I-P-P-I. In other words, she was empowering me. Just like that young child, my classmate could learn how to spell Mississippi, so can you. So at that time, she became a mother bear. She was fighting for me and my academic success. Years later, when I was in high school, I went to a high school that was challenging, to say the least. And I remember Again, we grew up in a very poor, rural area by the time I was a teenager. And violence in schools, and unfortunately what we're seeing too much of now. But I remember my mom keep telling all of us, you're going to college. Like, neither mom nor dad had been to college, so what does that mean? What does that look like? And unfortunately, the school that I attended, the high school, did not provide the services, supports needed for those of us who lived in that community, who lived in poverty, who did not have anyone to guide us and direct us into going to college. But again, the mother bear said, you are going to college. And that's helped me focus and to have a direction, a path to go to college. And so I bless God. And my hope today is to educate, equip, and empower you all to be mother bears, mother grandmothers, mother great-grandmothers, in order to fight for our children. And I bless God. And when I look back on the sacrifices that both my mom and dad made, and I remember when they dropped me off at Howard, they gave me a sum total of $25. That was all they had. But bless God, he is God. And beyond Howard and to GW, only through the power of God. So I bless God. I have a testimony I won't share today, maybe another day. Truly the hand of God on my career. Again, as you see in the PowerPoint, parental essential role in facilitating children's academic success. I did not know that speech and language, that I'm in the Bible. My profession, I should say, is in the Bible. Psalm 19, 1 through 4. Day unto day utter speech, and night unto night showeth knowledge. There is no speech nor language where their voice is not heard. Their line is gone out through all the earth, and their words to the end of the world. In them hath he set a tabernacle for the sun. So amen. Now I'm going to keep it real raw and righteous. I think I may need some help, and someone helping me go from one slide to another. I think I have a person here that might be able to help me, my friend. Thank you. Okay. Again, Celestina Edmonds from Integrated Speech Therapy Services. Thank you. All right. My purpose, I hope the outcome will be, again, that you will be educated, equipped, and empowered to, again, like a mother bear, to fight for our children, to go into the school systems, and to be a part of the school boards. Later on, I will talk specifically about what is happening within Prince George's County. I know this is Charles County, but unfortunately, what we're seeing in Prince George's County for a disproportionate number of our students is very concerning. So I'll share that a little later. And keeping aware of the time constraints, I'm just going to give a blurb, because what you'll see probably on here will look like a dissertation. But I promise you, I will not go through everything. We'll go through quickly, because I do want to talk about your perceptions of what you're seeing with young people. And so I want this to be interactive, and I want you, as if your moms, grandparents, share with us, all of us, what things you found to be successful in helping your child be successful in school. All right? Next, please. Like I said, they would pick the technologically challenged person to be last. Thank you, Carmen. Oh, okay. That's my phone. Right, perfect timing. Thank you, sir. I'm just trying to progress from one to the next. Thank you. Okay, could we go back to the first one, if you can? Next one. Stop. Okay. You know what? God, you have plans and God has plans. We'll stop at this point. Like I said, considering the time constraints. Okay. As a speech language pathologist, I want to tell you, sometimes we're called speech therapists. Same thing. The terminology is used interchangeably. We can stay here at this point. But my role as a speech pathologist is to, once there's a referral from a parent, a written referral from a parent to the school, from a teacher, any one of the stakeholders within the educational domain, to say we're concerned about this child may have a speech and or language disorder, then that's where I come in. I'm the qualified examiner for speech and language disorders. However, I work within a multidisciplinary team, and when we meet together, after I've done my evaluation, I not only provide my input, because we have to look at the whole child. I just cannot look at, unless it's maybe a speech disorder, like fluency, stuttering, or a speech sounds disorder, then I can come into a meeting and say, this child only has a speech disorder. But if there's a language disorder, because there's so many interrelated factors and variables that impact our children, cognition, in the level of that child's intellectual ability, that child's mental health abilities, that child's motor skill abilities. When we look here, just a blurb for each one. Speech and language, I examine receptive language. How will that child understand spoken language? Okay? Expressive language looks not only at verbal but nonverbal communication as well. As you may know, some children who are disabled, they may use hearing impaired sign language, or they may have a communication device. They are still communicating. So I look at, when I do testing, verbal as well as nonverbal communication. Pragmatic language skills, that's looking at the social, emotional skills of the child, not mental health, at how well that child can engage in social interaction, how well that child follow the rules of conversation. And as I mentioned, I look at speech, articulation, voice, and fluency or stuttering as well. Okay, so essential and critical. I am not, as a speech pathologist, cannot do testing in the realm of cognition, cognitive. That's the psychologist would do that. But cognitive development is intertwined with language development. Children develop some level, at their level of cognition prior to developing speech and language skills. So as we see, these are the different components of cognition: attention, memory, reasoning, processing, visual, spatial skills, flexibility, executive function. A major piece that is very heavily intertwined with language skills, executive functions as well. We also have to look at motor skills. Again, that's maybe an OT, occupational therapy, physical therapists that will look at gross motor skills or fine motor skills. We have to make sure that the oral mechanism, the mouth, is working properly before that child can begin speaking intelligently. Okay. Are we stuck? Okay. All right, thank you. I'm going to just continue because I know we're, again, time constraint. I'm going to talk a little bit about, when we're talking about grief and trauma. Again, that is outside of my lane. But a few years ago, I remember praying, be careful what you pray for. But I prayed, I said, God, I want to work with children who are labeled emotionally disturbed. And he answered that prayer. And I had opportunity to work at a school for kids labeled emotionally disturbed in Prince George's County, disproportionately African American males that attended this particular school, and I was not prepared for the level of anger, rage, and grief that I witnessed at this particular school. And I had to redefine my role as a speech pathologist, and I had again to not only be concerned about whether this child was learning, of course critical, but they had so much emotional baggage that I had to deal with emotional baggage, the mental health issues and challenges, more often than not, before I addressed the speech and or language disabilities. But I found out in working with these children how talented, creative these children are. And I also found out that sometimes the school system at times there's a failure within the school system, not all, but sometimes, because they're not tapping into the gifts and the talents of these children. They're expecting, it is an expectation for all children to know to be able to access the general education curriculum. There is a teacher have to rely on, and they follow that curriculum. So it is an expectation that at kindergarten that children will know this, at 5th grade and 6th grade, all the way through 12th grade. There is an expectation. They do need to know what is in the curriculum. But oftentimes, these children, their type of thinking, their reasoning, processing, their learning style is so different than the expectations of the curriculum. I met a young man the other day who said, I knew all the answers on tests, but I did not like school. I did not like the schoolwork, the homework. He said, I'm a hands-on type of man. He said, I like putting things together. Now he's a supervisor of a construction company. But unfortunately, too often, we focus more on the curriculum and the reading and the writing, all very critical, all very important. But we're not looking at that broad range of knowledge that many of our kids exhibit. Disproportionately and unfortunately, we know too many of our young African American males are, again, many are doing well. So again, I'm talking about disproportionately those who are end up from the school to prison pipeline, those that are in juvenile offenders. Oftentimes, there's an oral language disability deficit. Oftentimes, these children cannot read. And I've seen that